Hey, movie lovers and citizens of Earth, welcome back to Extra Entertainment Extra. Terry Hart has toddled off back to TMN, but in her place, I'm very excited to have a very special guest. Brent Butt is sitting in with us. He's an award-winning comic from small-town Tisdale, Saskatchewan. He's a veteran of the stand-up comedy circuit and television shows like CTV's hit sitcoms Corner Gas and Hiccups, and he is now the star of a new film called No Clue. In the film, he plays Leo, a Vancouver knick-knack salesman who finds himself amid murder and skullduggery, I like saying that word, when he's bedazzled by a femme fatale played by Amy Smart. You wrote this as well, right?
I did, but the way you describe it makes me want to see this movie now.
I know. Well, see, I try and put bums in seats, which I don't think you're going to have much of a problem with this movie. But I've heard that when you were pitching the film, people didn't really get the tone that you were looking for, and you had to go a ways back in movie history to kind of sell it, right?
Yeah, and it can kind of be a hard sell because people don't want you to go back to the 30s to find a... But yeah, it's a comedy, but it's a murder mystery, and it's a real dark, gritty thriller. And that's, the combination of two genres that doesn't happen a lot.
Right.
People combining dark, gritty mysteries with comedy. And so one of the movies that I used as a touchstone when I was pitching this was the Thin Man series.
Right,
which is
Nick and Nora.
Nick and Nora. So like it's a very dark, classic kind of detective murder mystery in a lot of ways, but the main characters just say funny things, and that's basically what No Clue is like. It's really, I wanted to make a movie that if it wasn't funny, it would still be entertaining, it would still be thrilling and a mystery, and have all those good juicy elements, and then the funny kind of folds in like gravy. It's on top of everything else. The character says and does funny things.
Yeah, well, exactly. So Leo is kind of the center point for all the humor in it. How do you find a balance between making sure that Leo doesn't appear to be dropped in from another universe? Because he says funny things, he does funny things, but he is still the person that in a lot of ways is pushing the action. He's investigating a crime. There's a lot of stuff. People get hurt. There's a bashed-in brain scene here.
Yeah.
There's that sort of stuff. So how do you make sure that Leo doesn't feel like he's acting in a different movie than everybody else?
It is a tricky balancing act, from the writing standpoint. I mean, there were a lot of things that I thought were funny jokes that I neglected to put in the movie because I felt, this is funny, but it's ultimately going to damage the reality. And for this movie to work, it does have to feel real, and then everything kind of plays off of that. So, there were certain jokes that I thought of I couldn't put in. And then on set, Carl Basai, our director, that he had to watch that and had to make sure. One of the things we did early on was tell everybody, with the exception of David Koechner, we said to everybody, forget that this is a comedy.
Right.
Just pretend you're making a dark murder mystery. That's what this is, and then the comedy will come in from elsewhere. So it's a balancing act and tricky, but I think we nailed it.
David Koechner, of course, we know from the Hangover movies and loads of other things. He plays your best friend, and he kind of pops in and out of the movie and provides, I don't know, this doesn't give anything away, provides a clue at one point that helps you solve what's all going on there.
Well, that's the great fun of writing a mystery. I've never done that before. Mm-hmm. So the process is really, you write forward a bit and then you have an idea and you realize you got to go back and plant a seed. And so you're going back and forth and laying pipe. And you want to, I took, again, this is an old reference, but I kind of took to the guys who created Ellery Queen. They came up with a phrase that they called fair play. And that was, you can't spring something on the audience in the solution that they didn't have, you can't spring, but you didn't know he went to college in Uganda. Well, we didn't know that. How could we have solved the mystery? So you got to plant all those seeds. And, but yeah, David Koechner, he's kind of, in some ways, he's a device. He's a character that my character can talk to and exchange information. And ultimately, it's kind of sharing that information with the viewer.
I kind of felt while I was watching this, not so much Nick and Nora for me, because that's just, I loved those movies. Asta, their dog Asta, Nick and Nora. But I thought of Columbo and the Friday Night Mystery Wheel. Remember that when you were a kid, NBC's Friday Night Mystery Wheel? So 1 week would be Columbo, 1 week would be
Macmillan and Wife.
Yeah. And Columbo came up in my mind. Leo is a bit bumbling, I think it's fair to say. He kind of... he's smarter than people give him credit for. There was a lot of sort of Peter Falkishness, I thought there. Was Columbo, which I happen to think is one of the greatest TV shows ever made, was that an influence on you at all?
I not consciously. I never thought of that until now that you say it. And I mean, I take it that's high praise because I loved the Columbo series and Peter Falk was fantastic. And I watched enough of it that maybe it was subconsciously an influence in there. But it wasn't one of the ones that was in my mind as I was writing. Right. I was thinking more in terms of Fletch was one of the movies.
Yeah.
Even though the characters that Chevy Chase does in Fletch are, they're pretty big characters. But mainly it's it's an action thriller movie. And Beverly Hills Cop, which a lot of people don't know, was written not to be a funny movie. It was written to be kind of a thriller. And then once they cast
Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah. And then they cast Eddie and said, well, let's make it funny then.
Yeah.
But if you take all of the funny things that Eddie Murphy says out of it, it still holds water as an action movie.
Right. And you're playing opposite Amy Smart, who is the femme fatale here. And she's fantastic in the movie. It's a lot of fun to see her do this. Do something like this.
She was great in the movie. And, we needed somebody who could play both sides of that coin because when you first meet this character, she seems, she's very vulnerable and she's looking for help. But you soon learn that there's maybe more to her than meets the eye. She's mysterious and there's an element of danger. And ultimately, Leo becomes very afraid of her.
Yeah,
while still being attracted to her because she's pretty dishy, She's easy on the eyeballs.
How did she come to be involved in the project? Was she someone that you had in mind?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where you have a kind of a list of people that you think could play the part well, and she was on that list. And we sent the movie out to some people to read, and we got really good feedback on the script. It's one of the things I'm proudest of. Because this is the first mystery movie that I've written. So we got good feedback on the script from everybody, and then it comes down to other people's schedules, and your list winnows down a bit. But when she and I read together, everybody involved said this has a really good chemistry. That's part of it. It's those intangibles that you can't really put on paper when you get the two characters in the room reading a scene, and you feel that there's a connection between them somehow, and that felt like it was there with her and I.
My guest in studio is Brent Butt. The film is called No Clue. It's in theaters everywhere this weekend. Co-stars with David Koechner and Amy Smart. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the film and a little bit about doing stand-up because you're in the middle. Not only do you have a film coming up, but you're in the middle of a big stand-up tour now as well. So stay with us. Brent Butt is my guest in studio. Hey, movie lovers and citizens of Earth, welcome back to Extra Entertainment Extra. I'm Richard Crouse. In studio, I have Brent Butt. He is the star of a film in theaters right now called No Clue. He plays Leo, a Vancouver knick-knack salesman who finds himself amid murder and skullduggery when he is bedazzled by a femme fatale played by Amy Smart. Congratulations on the movie.
Thank you very much.
Now, it premiered at the Whistler Film Festival.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. You were on television for many, many years. You have stood in front of thousands of audiences. This is a different thing, I think, going up and saying, this is a movie that I wrote. This is a movie that I starred in. My fingerprints are all over every bit of this thing. I hope you like it.
Yeah, that's really what it is because especially with my stand-up background, like long before Corner Gas came along, but basically 15 years before Corner Gas came along, I just played clubs. I was just a greasy nightclub comic out there getting it done. And then, when you're doing that, you always have the ability to kind of shift gears. So if you're up on stage in front of people and it's kind of not going well, if they're not buying what you're selling, you can say, okay, I'm going to shift gears. Maybe they're not buying the sports stuff. I'll talk about politics. Right. You can kind of shift gears there. But with this movie, there's no opportunity. If they're not liking it 5 minutes in, you can't say, okay, let's stop them. Everybody go get a drink. I'm going to go re-edit this. You just know that you're locked into this. And we really felt totally objectively that we had made the movie we wanted to make. We really liked the movie that we made. But that part of my brain that's the stand-up comic said, what you think doesn't really matter. The audience will let you know. And, the audience is everything to me. So at the Whistler Film Festival, that was the first opportunity I got to sit in the room with strangers and have them watch the movie. And I was very nervous going into it. But the response was better than we could have ever imagined. The laughs came early, they came often, and then those parts of the movie that aren't funny, where it is tense. Right. I was looking around the room, and you could see people were engaged in the movie on their face. So I'm really proud of how this worked out, and the response has been great so far.
Interesting that you're now in the midst of this big tour, and you talk about as a stand-up being able to shift, and that I dated a stand-up comic for years, and she some nights would do a set that would just go over like gangbusters. The next night you couldn't pry a laugh out of people. When you're playing these big venues that you're playing, you're not a greasy little nightclub comic or whatever it was you called yourself earlier. You're playing large venues now. Are you still able to like be that nimble when you're in front of 1,500 people and shift? Are you confident enough to shift, or is it just the same show just with more people in front of you?
It's the same show, but you do have to be nimble. You have to find a way. It's a little tougher, because everything is just magnified. You know, in the old days, if you were up in front of 150 or 200 people at a club, it's just magnified when you're in front of 1,000 people and you're trying to shift gears. It's like, driving a van versus driving an 18-wheeler. Right. You can still make the turns and you can still stop, but you need a little more time. You need a little more acreage. And so, but luckily I've been playing, good-sized venues now for a while. I kind of have that rhythm down. And, for the most part, having done it long, this is my 26th year of being a comic, you start to rely on your instincts that you've gathered over the years, and you start to, I usually have an opening act, and I stand in the wings and I listen, and I kind of try and get a sense of what the crowd is like and what they're liking and what they're not liking, and I kind of shape my act from there. And that's one of the things I love about doing it live. Every night is different. 26 years later, I'm standing in the wings going, I wonder what tonight is going to be like. You have no clue until you get out there.
The movie is called No Clue. The star is Brent Butt. We'll be back with a little more extra entertainment extra in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk more about the film. We're going to talk a little bit about Corner Gas and just a little bit more about Brent Butt doing stand-up for 26 years. Hey, movie lovers and citizens of Earth, welcome back to Extra Entertainment Extra. I'm Richard Crouse. In studio, Brent Butt joins me. He is the star of No Clue in theaters right now. It's a comedic murder mystery. You play Leo, a kind of bumbling, I think, Columbo type. You see him more as Nick, the thin man.
Maybe somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between.
But I like your Columbo notion. I'm enjoying that.
Yeah. Well, Columbo, as I said earlier, maybe the greatest television show ever. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Corner Gas. On for years, people have such an idea of you from that show.
Yeah.
When they go see the movie, will they see more of what they expect to see or less, or does it matter to you?
I think they'll see a lot of what they expect. I mean, I always say I kind of act like Bob Hope. It didn't matter if he was a pirate or an astronaut or a cowboy. You kind of got that guy. So there's shades of that in there. The difference being, so you'll definitely recognize that. I'm a kind of a wisecracking guy. I say either smart assy things or dopey things.
Yep.
But the difference being in this is that there's, this is a more realistic scenario. Like with Corner Gas and then with Hiccups, that half-hour comedy stuff that I did, you're really looking to just hang your jokes on these characters.
Right.
Whereas, you're telling a bigger, deeper story with a movie, and it's more realistic. And so, as you know, in this movie, my character finds himself in some legitimately dangerous situations with some legitimately bad people. And there's stakes, whereas, there's rarely stakes in the half-hour comedy stuff that I do. So, lives are on the line, including my own. So it's kind of that, if you like what I do, it's kind of like that character, but suddenly it's more real, and suddenly, his life is on the line, and he is in over his head, and there are real stakes to this.
Yeah, it's like he moved to Vancouver and just got
sucked into a murder mystery.
Now, years ago, you're based in Vancouver. You did stand up in Toronto for a number of years. You went back to the West Coast, and you ended up opening shows for the Kids in the Hall. Tell me a little bit about those days. Because to me, those shows sounded so exciting because they were edgy and kind of weird and kind of unlike. It was a time I really feel, and I wasn't there to see those shows, but it was a time I really felt that comedy in this country changed.
Yeah.
And you were at the ground zero of it.
Well, there was kind of two things. When I think of the Kids of the Hall, there's kind of two things. Like when they did that live tour, I had done studio warm-up for them here in Toronto. So when they were taping their TV shows, they would always have a comic, and they would throw their buddies a bone and say, come down. It was a great gig, $250,
wow,
and the audience loved you because one of the kids would, the audience was such rabid Kids in the Hall fans. One of the kids, Bruce or Dave or Kevin or somebody, would come out and introduce you as a friend of theirs. So now you can't lose. The crowd wants you to like them. So it was a sweet gig. But when I moved to Vancouver, just shortly before they decided to do their live shows. And so they called me up and said they were starting a tour in Vancouver and Victoria and wanted me to open for them on tour. And seeing them live in front of an audience and seeing the place go crazy. It was like the Beatles.
Yeah.
Like when Buddy comes strutting out in his feather boa, the place is going crazy. And it really dawned on me there, sitting in the back of the room watching this, that everybody in this room is excited about the Kids in the Hall based on having seen them on Canadian television, because they were on HBO in the States and we didn't get HBO in Canada at the time. They were only visible to Canadian viewers on a Canadian station, and the crowd was going crazy. And that kind of told me the opposite of what I had been told, that you can't have a homegrown hit here. Right. And I always felt that you could. I'd always heard otherwise. And then seeing what the Kids in the Hall did kind of validated my own thought that if you do something good and do something authentic, you can have it just air in Canada and have Canadian audience. And that's what happened with Corner Gas.
And Corner Gas had a good run.
Yeah, it was.
It was a good run.
Yeah, I mean, I just decided we were still at the top of the ratings when I decided to pull the plug, and it's just I never wanted Corner Gas was too important to me to let it die on the vine. I just couldn't stand to see it get old and wither and become less than what it could be. And I kind of made a promise to the show that I would never let that happen. And I've said this before. I felt like the show tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, we could stick around longer if you want, but we should wrap this up. And plus, as a creative person, you want to create. You don't want to keep going through the same motions. You want to create new things. That's what we do.
And that's what you've done with No Clue. It's playing in theaters right now. You are the writer and the star of a comedic murder mystery. Go check it out this weekend. My guest in studio, Brent Butt. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.